When our best fur friends leave our world, many of us are left wanting one last scritch, one last hug, one last walk together. One Last Network is a space for pet guardians to honor their pets in their senior years and to cope with the days leading up to and after their passing. Here's your host, Angela Schneider, founder of One Last Network and Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington.
Hello! We are hitting episode number 30 today. I can't believe we're hitting this little milestone. Our guest today talks to animals, and they talk back to her. Nancy Mello learned early in her life that she was able to hear what animals are trying to tell us all. Their likes, their dislikes, their wants, their needs, and when they feel it's time to go. Nancy reached out to be a guest on the podcast and share her abilities as an animal communicator and evidential medium. I told her in full disclosure that I'm a skeptic, that I may not fully believe what she does is real. She said that was okay, that she relished the challenge. Nancy connects with her clients over the phone or on Zoom, so she's able to help and comfort pet parents all over the world. Her readings range from 15 minutes to 2 hours, and like our friend Laurie Blomer, who was featured in episode 4, The Art of Seeing into a Photo, she uses a photo to hear the animal talk. She's been featured in the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Tribune, Cosmopolitan UK, and Dogster magazine. Since 2020, she has worked with almost 1,000 animals and helped owners find dozens of lost pets. She also helps rescues understand what kind of family an animal in shelter may need to thrive in its forever home. She has a special passion for end-of-life sessions, in which she talks to animals about how they want their last days to look. Nancy and I have a lively discussion about her abilities, how they work, and what it all means to her. Have a listen. Good morning, Nancy Mello. How's your day going?
It's wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Give us a little rundown on who you are and what you do.
I am an animal communicator and evidential medium. I live in Mystic, Connecticut, so I say I'm a mystic in Mystic. But I work with people and pets all over the world. I think I've now worked with people in like 61, 62 countries. So I have this really cool gift. I call it a party trick. I used to use it to get cute boys or maybe a girl or two in my 20s to give me a kiss. I'd say, oh, like I can tell you what your grandfather did, or I can tell you what your cat is thinking, and if I'm right, you can take me out to dinner. And it worked. It was great when I was living in Seattle. But yeah, so no, I can communicate with people and pets just by seeing their eyes. And a lot of times, even without just hearing their name, I can kind of give you a brief idea, their name and kind of where they are. I can generally give a pretty okay idea on what's going on. I like the photo though. I talk about it's Wi-Fi versus 5G, right? So when I have the photo and I can see their eyes, I can just click right in. Without their photo, it's like 5G. I'd be a little, off and on, hit a little bit. So I work with pets that are alive, pets that are past. And one thing that I'm really proud of doing is I work with a lot of hospice animals and end-of-life care. I was actually featured in Dogster magazine in January 2021. I'm trying to remember 2021, 2020, 2022 for my work with end-of-life. So end-of-life care basically entails that we will talk when you feel like your pet is nearing its end of life. So this pet could be a dog, could be a cat, but I've worked with squirrels, I've worked with ferrets, I've worked with all different kinds of animals. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cat or dog, although I've worked with horses, although cats, dogs, horses, rabbits, most common. So what you'll do is we'll chat, and I'll be able to give you a bucket list idea of what they would enjoy doing before passing. I have heard everything from cheese to the white stuff, which is sometimes sour cream, sometimes ice cream, They might say that they want to go out in the sun. Generally, it's their favorite things, and generally it's stuff that's doable. Sometimes it's not doable. Like I've had several animals that they want to go by the water, or they have this wonderful memory of when, when their owners took them 5 years ago to the shore. But we work through that. I also talk about, I'm able to connect and see about their pain level, an idea. Although I'm not a veterinarian, I'm not going to diagnose anything. I can give you an idea of how they're feeling, as far as, do they understand their passing, and what we can do to make a plan for that passing. So that can include where they want to pass. Do they want to pass at home? Do they want to pass at the vet? How do they want to pass? Do they want to try and go on their own? Do they want assistance? Would they appreciate assistance? And even who's with them? Do they want the family with them? Do they want their other pet family with them? Or do they want to go alone? So my goal is to be as specific as possible in this information to give you. And I try and give you a rough idea on time. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes, because I believe in the chaos theory. So me just saying it can change an outcome or change things. So I might say, okay, it might be around this time. Sometimes it's 5 days, sometimes it's 2 weeks, but I definitely can give you an idea of the time frame. But what I really enjoy is being able to make that connection and let their owners know what their animals want. And I think by doing that, it starts that grieving process, but also because you're honoring the pet, it gives you that sense that you are doing everything you can, that you're not helpless. And I really, really enjoy doing that. It gives me such, I wouldn't say joy, but it's such an, I say it every time, it's such an honor. And it truly is. I feel so honored to work with every single pet that's crossed, that is ready to cross.
Let's back up just a tiny bit. When did you discover that you had this ability? And do you prefer ability over gift, or does it
either whatever you want to say? I'm good. No, I've always had these abilities ever since I can remember. I grew up on a small farm in Northern California. By farm, I don't mean animals, I mean cornfields and wheat. However, we did have 3 pigs, Moker, Poker, and Joker, and I would go out and connect with them and be able to, and we were all alone. We were 7 miles from the nearest town. I was the youngest by 3 years of the kids, and I was lonely. And so I remember knowing that people were around me and knowing that I had love, and just there was energy around me. And I definitely picked up on the energy in the area. My grandmother passed when I was 6, and she immediately started coming around and talking to me. But in regards to the animals, because I was so lonely and because I knew I was different, I would remember going out to their pen, and they seemed to just have this innate understanding of what I needed, and they would cuddle with me. I have these really neat pictures, and I need to find them, of me with the pigs just cuddling in with them, and they kind of would surround me and just keep me safe. And I seemed to know what they needed, and they seemed to know what I needed. Because we were 7 miles from this town, it was interesting because, and I know it happens to this day, but animals would be dropped off. We were a mile from a country road, and these animals started coming back. And even my mom, who is very practical, very realistic to this day, she would say, animals knew to come to you, Nancy. She said they just knew that to come. And I've since learned that some of us have kind of a light, or it's like a beacon that can attract animals. It's almost, and I tell people, like, if you just open your mind and think about who is that person in your life, you'll immediately think of someone that just animals are drawn to. And so I seem to understand early on. When I started practicing, that's a little different, because growing up in small town, definitely I was, and as soon as I told my mom that I was hearing my dead grandmother speak, that was, I was sent off to the doctor, and I was also raised Catholic. So we got lots of, lots of things, put on a bunch of medication, it was not easy.
When you realized what you could do, how did you translate that into providing a service for pet parents?
I didn't for a very long time. I
Mhm.
was in denial. It was something that not many people knew about me. I was afraid because I had been told and shunned and diagnosed with everything under the sun, that everything I was hearing and feeling was not real. And so I lived my life. I had my little starter marriage in my early 20s, my starter marriage that lasted a couple of years. I got married in Vegas, which I thought, looking back, it's a blast to get married in Vegas. What the marriage didn't work out, but I checked that off my bucket list. No, so I lived my life, and I always had animals. I had, 6, 8 cats. And again, I would foster, I would work with rescues. I was always very connected. But it wasn't until actually just a few years ago, about 4 years ago, where I felt like I was coming to a crossroads in my own life. With I had kind of checked off the motherhood thing, and I've checked off the successful marriage thing, and as we were speaking about before, my spouse is active duty military, and so I had kind of tried to fit in every box I could, and I just couldn't make it. I just was unhappy. And I knew deep down that this is what the universe wanted me to do. This is what God wanted me to do, was to help. I just I couldn't get there inside me. I wasn't ready. I wasn't I didn't I was so afraid of the condemnation, uh because of everything that happened prior. So yeah, I kind of just had an epiphany, and I realized if I could help one person or one pet, that it would be worth it, that the rejection, that the name calling, all that stuff would be worth it. And it's interesting how it worked with my first end of life client. It was an acquaintance that I knew from the area, and she knew what I did. And the first time I worked with her, the dog's name was Cleo, and the first time I worked with her, she thought Cleo was ready to go very right then. And it turned out that Cleo, this is where I learned that there was a bucket list. And as soon as I started talking to Cleo talked about and of course I had no knowledge. Like I knew of this person, but I had no idea where she lived. I barely knew her name. Um, and all of a sudden, she's talking to me about Cleo wanted to go and chase the gulls at the shore. She wanted to go, and it was very specific. She wanted to go by the rocks. And it turned out I was describing something right by Cleo's house that they did every day. And she wanted to do this. And so she just started listing things that she wanted. And so the client went ahead and over the next couple of months did those things, and Cleo blossomed. She had been very arthritic and had been moving a lot. And as soon as my client started fulfilling these things that Cleo had told me, Cleo at one time she was a puppy, became very puppy-like. And then the time came where she messaged me, and it was at the very beginning of COVID. And I remember this because they were within a 30-minute drive. And I remember saying, do you want me to come out? But it was very, it's when we were still making our own masks and everything. And yeah, I mean, and we had no idea. And I just remember, like, it was like right when quarantine started, like within a couple of weeks. And my client said, she is not good. And I said, okay. And I went out there with my handmade mask and took my shoes off at the door. And it was interesting though, because as I drove up, there was a black dog that crossed right in front of their house. And I walk in, and I'll never forget, Cleo picks her head up and she looks at me and she says, "Are you here to take me? Like, are you here to let me go? Are you here to help me cross?" And I remember, and I told her back in my head, like, "No, honey, I'm sorry. I'm just here to talk to you." And she put her head down, almost like resigned. And so I just asked her, how she was feeling, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Well, there's a black dog that's around me that I can't wait to see." So I told my client this, and I said, well, that's really interesting. There was a black dog that crossed right in front of me when I parked. And my client said, there's no way this is a coincidence. She said that black dog that passed was actually a neighbor's, and that was the replacement black dog, that their Cleo's friend that was the black dog next door had passed only a couple of years before, and that was their new black dog. So, and Cleo said this black dog was around her, waiting for her to come. So the fact that, I mean, there's no way I would know this stuff. And so we talked about where Cleo wanted to go, and Cleo talked about where she wanted to go outside, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
She was ready. And she passed a couple days later. And it was interesting because soon after she passed, she came to my client in a dream, and she showed me, I believe it was me. I'm trying to remember, it was me or someone speaking, and her name was in lights. And Cleo told her in the stream, people are going to know my name. And what's neat about that is a couple of years later, I'm contacted by Dogster magazine about end of life work. And I had, they approached me. I had no idea. And I happened to mention my first pet client, Cleo, and Cleo's name got in Dogster magazine.
You made her famous, just like she wanted.
Well, but it's interesting because it was like she was telling her owner that people will know me, because she was, of course, grieving and blah, blah, blah. But she said, people will know me. And sure enough, she was even like foretelling my success without even me realizing it, right? I was just doing this because, I had no idea that this would become a thing for me. Cleo, it just started like that. So it was very much being led and trusting the universe. When someone would call and say, my pet's passing, and of course I'm going to make time for you. Of course.
You mentioned the stigma that exists around what you do. And of course, in pet loss grief, we talk a lot about disenfranchised grief, where pet parents are often stigmatized against their grief because the rest of the world looks at companion animals as being a lesser kind of grief than any other kind of grief. Does the stigma you've experienced around your ability help give you a greater understanding of where pet parents are when they come to you in grief?
Hands down. I think that people like me verify that their grief is not only real, but valid. I think growing up, people have these beautiful and wonderful connections with their animals. And then their grandparent passes or someone passes. And because they're young, they don't really have a connection and they don't really grieve. And yet people around them are grieving, right? And so it's almost like you should be feeling this way. And then when they don't, they're like, well, is something wrong with me? And then a pet passes that they've had this amazing connection with, and then they grieve. And then people are criticizing them because they're grieving. My thing is that, and I've learned this through these processes, is that pet grief can very much be more so than someone passing, depending on your relationship. I lost a child 10 years ago, and so I feel like I can speak on, at least from my experience as a hashtag, child loss person. And I remember working with a client about pet grief, and they said it's like losing a child. And it was interesting because with my own experience with losing a child, like initially I would have been like, oh my gosh, it's not like losing a child, blah, 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 Right. And then I realized that for some people, though, it very much is, right? No one can dictate how you grieve and how much you grieve. And so a lot of times pet parents are embarrassed by their grief. They shut it down. And this is why I have so many people that come to me 20, 30 years after a pet's passed from their childhood, because they're still mourning that pet, because they haven't been allowed to grieve.
Right.
They haven't been allowed because it's being criticized. So I think what I take away from that is that no matter who it is or what it is, you have a right to your grief in whatever capacity you're feeling it.
On your website, you say faith is believing the impossible is
possible. Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that it's okay to be skeptic. It's okay to not be sure about any of this. It's unlike, I was talking with someone the other day. I think that growing up, even with religion or without, it's more acceptable to talk about, oh, my grandmother visited me in my dreams, or it's more acceptable for people that are in heaven to send signs. We don't really talk about animals. And it's kind of like, and I'm, it's such a disconnect. And I'm like, well, if people can, why can't animals? Well, because in some religions, they don't believe that animals have souls and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so faith is believing the impossible is possible. So it's believing that this thing that can't be proven, at least, I can't show you your pet in front of you. I can give you all these things, but I can't show you. But it's believing that it is possible. It is that all of this that you felt innately is possible. I had a message from a gentleman, and I love this. He grew up in Central America, and his girlfriend, his fiance, had purchased the session for him. And I could tell that, like, coming in, he was, kind of like, listening and indulging, but not really believing. And so I start talking about this dog that he unfortunately had to leave behind when he came to the States, and the dog tragically passed. And I was just talking about, what the dog saw, like that memories with him and the dog and all this stuff. And you could see over the session, his eyes just kind of getting wider and him getting emotional. And he actually just sent me a message on social media the other day. And he said, I was completely skeptic, but the things you said, there was no way. And he said, like, you made me a believer. So again, it's okay to say, is this real? That's okay. But just be open to the possibility that it is real. My spouse is a mechanical engineer in the Navy, and he always says, like, how he's reasoned what I do is, you haven't proved it yet. Like, just because science hasn't proved it doesn't mean it's not real. Just because we haven't been able to prove it, like, in numbers or whatever. But honestly, some of the most common professions I work with are doctors, neurologists, psychiatrists, are scientists, which I love, and it blows my mind, because those are the very people going, I know there's something here, because they have generally seen things in their profession that they can't explain.
Right.
So faith is believing the impossible is possible, and having that faith and going, okay, there's something here.
I'm the skeptic. So when you approached me about being on the podcast, I was like, yeah, okay. Because I'm open to anything. Yeah. I looked at your website and I was like, okay, she does some pretty cool shit.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. We actually had another communicator on in the beginnings of this podcast, Laurie Blomer. I think she's in Massachusetts or New Hampshire or something like that. My friend Darlene Woodward interviewed her, and in the outro, I admitted my skepticism, but what I said mattered about what she does is that it brings great comfort to people who do believe. How does that make you feel?
Fine. I will say that, let's say, like, all this is crap, right? All of this is BS. Sure. And I always joke that if it was BS, I'd be charging a lot more. Like, I wouldn't be charging what I do. If I really wanted to BS with people, I would be charging more. No, but let's say, worst case scenario, all this is crap, whatever. I had a guy, actually, we were chatting beforehand, that I'd gone up to the city, gone down to New York City for actually working with hospice work a couple of weeks ago. And there was a guy on the train that was intoxicated. And somehow, I don't know, because I'm generally pretty quiet about my abilities in public, he somehow got out that I was an animal communicator. And he kind of looks over at me and he says, I have this theory that you're just highly empathetic. And that's all that you get from it. So let's say worst case scenario, he was hysterical. Let's say worst case scenario, that's what it is. At the end of the day, you pass 50 years from now, whatever, and all of this is crap. If it helps you, who cares?
Right.
At the end of the day, if it helps, if it brings you peace, who cares? I have a very strict code of ethos that I put on myself. Do no harm. Don't always be okay saying I'm not sure. Never, ever, ever. I mean, I couldn't lie to save my life, but still, like, always being very I just don't mess around. And if I do hear bad news about something, I say, do you really want to know? But I don't ever, 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 ever say anything that I am not positive about. And if I am not sure about something, I tell you I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, like, I could be wrong. Like, especially in terms of like hospice pets. I'll say, okay, this is I look at my calendar. This is what I'm thinking. Could be wrong. Could go either way. But at the end of the day, if it helps, who the hell cares? Like, as long as it's helping you, that's what matters to me. As long as I'm helping instead of hurting. Because if I'm hurting, then I'm doing something, then I don't want to be doing this. I would never ever do anything to hurt someone else.
Yeah.
Or pet. I just couldn't. I couldn't.
You also work with rescues to help an animal find the right home. Walk me through that.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. I work with rescues all over the world. We have one in the Middle East. We have them all over, and I love it. I'm actually going to be doing a fundraiser in a couple months down in Kentucky, where and so what I do is, you'll have a rescue and they're like, look, we have this, let's say it's a challenging dog, and this dog is doing this, and I will basically ask the dog what they want. And so, when you go to like a shelter and they're like, good with kids, blah, blah, blah. That's basically what I ask the pet. I say, are you okay in an apartment? Do you want a yard? What do you want? Is there anything trauma-based that you don't want around you? Some dogs have been hurt by men, unfortunately, or whatever. Like, what is it that you need in an ideal situation? And that's what I tell the rescue. I worked not too long ago with a cat cafe, and cat cafes are very dangerous for me because I just want to adopt them all. But no, I worked with a couple of the cats, and it was like, you had two cats that wanted to be together. So that's another thing. Are they bonded with another animal? Are they okay with cats? Are they okay with another dog? How do they feel? And then I also work on the other side of it with clients. So let's say they want to get another animal, and it's always a very, very quick answer. Yes, no. The dog wants another dog. Yes, no. And then so I talk to that dog or that animal about what they want. So it's just like a marriage, right? You want to make sure that you're a good fit all around.
You're a pet counselor.
Yeah. But I love it because then you see them thrive, and that makes me so happy. Or, in cases where you have a highly volatile animal that's been highly traumatized, if you can get them in the right home, then the chance of them being returned goes down. The chance of them thriving just skyrockets. Yeah. And it's all about listening to the animal.
It's not crazy to think that animals have their own wants and desires.
Is that a question or statement?
Question.
I mean, it's no different than us. If scientifically, if they've proven that animals can feel pain, they've shown that all kinds of animals can experience emotion, that they can feel loss, and you can just see it when an animal dies and you have the other animal mourn. So, I mean, to me, it's not crazy to assume they feel emotion. I mean, if they can feel pain, and they can feel happiness, right? They wag their tail when you come in. Why can't they have their own wants and needs? I mean, it's just like the dog that suddenly doesn't want their dog food, that wants, especially if you guys have your dogs or cats on a kidney food, 9 times out of 10, the animals hate it. Every time I talk to a dog or cat that's on that special kidney food, I don't know what's in there, but I've had one dog in like 2 years of tracking this in my head will like that kidney food. It's something about the kidney food they hate. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, they have likes and dislikes about their food. I got a new toy for my cat, and she didn't vet it because I got it on Chewy, and I started playing with her last night, and she's like, yeah, no. Like, immediately she knew this was not a toy she wanted. But so yeah, if we can see it even in their reactions. I mean, it's the same thing with some animals I talk to. They like they'll say the orange stuff. So generally orange stuff is carrots or sweet potatoes. And some animals hate it. Like I tried it with my dogs over Christmas holiday, because I had so many dogs, one after another. They loved their carrots. They loved their carrots. Carrots were treats. And I gave them to my dogs, and they were like, what the hell is this? Like, but see, so yeah, so is it reasonable? Yeah. I mean, you look at how they approach food. You look at how they approach the outside. You have some dogs that could care less about taking a walk around the block. I'm looking at bulldogs. I'm looking at wiener dog. Like, there are certain breeds, especially, that are just like, yeah, I'm done. But just, it goes across breeds. It goes across temperaments. Some dogs are just like, no. You have other dogs that will freaking go 10 miles and still want more. So 100%, it's not, if you just look at your own animal, you can say without any other, just knowing you can say, do they like blankets on them? Do they like, do they get overly hot, just like a child? I say I have the best job in the world because I never know what I'm going to expect. I mean, I'm not psychic about myself, and I always go into every session with an open mind. So I never know. And I love, there are sessions where you're going to have tears, and there are sessions where you're going to be laughter, and you're going to have sessions where there's both. But what I love, and I call it the aha moment, is there's a moment during every session where it's very clear that I'm connecting with your pet. It's very clear that there's no way that I would know that you once had a house that faced this lake, and there was long grass by the lake, and that's what the dog ate and loved to eat. And now you've moved, and the dog's irritated that it can't have the long grass by the lake. But there's that one moment, and it's the aha moment. And when that clicks, it flows. Okay, this is a possibility, right? That's where faith starts creeping in.
Yeah. How many
possible?
How many animals do you currently have in your own home?
I have 2 cats, 2 dogs, and 1 husband. Counting my husband. I would have more, but I love my spouse, and I'm very afraid that he would walk away if I had more. He was just gone. We were talking before the show. My spouse is active duty, and he was just what they call geo-batching, where he lived elsewhere for 2 years. And there were many, many times that I wanted to get more, that I had an opportunity. If it were up to me, I would have a little small farm. I'd have guinea pigs and rabbits, and yeah. So that's the limit that I think my spouse is willing to be at. Mm-hmm. And if I got any more, I love my marriage. I love my husband. So it would be very much a choice that I'd be having to make, and I very much know that. Like, he loves me, and he knows I'm going to do stuff. The cat number 2 that we have was adopted when he was underway. And my argument was, well, he wasn't around to check. And then, to be fair, I didn't know if I was going to get her. Like, I put in the adoption application. I wasn't sure. So I get this call, and my spouse is back, and we have to go pick up this cat. And I hadn't told him that I'd even looked at the cat. And I go, so honey, I need to go get a cat. What do you mean? Well, I kind of put in an application. I didn't think I'd get it. And now we have a cat coming today. Consequently, that cat is now his, because the cat went to go live with him down when he was geo-batching, and that cat is all over him. Like, they bonded, and he is not a cat person, but that cat chose him. So it worked out. See, my psychic senses knew that cat was for him. But yeah, no. I want more, but
What are
I
their
love my
names?
husband. So we have Katniss and Prim are the two cats. If you're a Hunger Games fan, you'll get that. And my two dogs are Domino and Abby K.
Abby K. Do they talk to you
Yes.
all the time?
No, well, I'm open to it. So as a communicator, as a psychic, I if I was on 24/7, I mean, it's exhausting. So I call turning it off. I joke that I like Real Housewives and reality shows. That's how it helps turn me off. So I'm able to just focus. But I definitely know when they need something. There was one time that I was actually in a session and my cat Prim was behind me, and I was like, yeah, the cat's been peeing outside, your cat's been peeing outside the litter box. And the client's like, that's really interesting, I haven't noticed that. And I look behind me, and actually I see the client's eyes look behind me, and I look behind me, and Prim was peeing outside the litter box.
Oh.
So yeah, yeah, I mean, they can. Sometimes I just ignore it because honestly, it's just like a parent and a child. Like, I know you guys want things. I can't give you everything. So like right now we are waiting for a shipment of a cat wall that Prim has been bugging me about for a few months. So, I would be broke if I listened to every want and need.
Right.
But we are getting a cat wall. Like a ledge for her to run on.
We got to keep them happy.
I do. I try, and I adore them all in their own ways, and I am grateful. I am very grateful. Yeah, I always want more, and I have fostered some before, but they will not be foster fails, and my spouse has made that clear to me. Like we fostered one cat for a couple of weeks, and my spouse said, she's a good cat, but no. And then actually it was Katniss that really told me she did not want another cat, and I was listening to them as well. Katniss does not want any more animals. Prim's enough for her.
So is Katniss the queen?
No, Prim thinks she is. Prim thinks that she owns this joint and everything is good. Like, Prim is hot cat. Katniss is the one that takes care of me. I always have an animal with me in my office during sessions, and Katniss is the one that really, like, at the end of the day, she'll come and cuddle with me and purr. So scientifically, they have found that people have been using cat's purrs for healing since like the Grecian Roman times. There's an old, I think it's a Grecian saying that says, if you leave a cat with a bunch of broken bones, they'll heal. So purring, and Google this, it's fascinating, and they're still learning more that cat's purrs have healing effects. So anyway, so she'll cuddle up with me at night and heal, and help me heal and kind of recharge.
Wow. One of the things you have for sale on your website is a course called How to Speak with Your Pet.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, it's $10. So, and I say this with love. I joke that I have like my own psychic friends network of animal communicators and psychics that I trust. But I was just seeing all these courses that were like $500, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, again, I'm not about the money. Like, it's all about how I want everyone to be able to help and get help and help their pets. So it's these little 10-minute lessons in how to connect on your own. And I think the first one is just like teaching you how to just settle down and picture your pet in your mind. And then you start with like the first lesson, I think, is like yes or no questions. Yes, no. And then just trusting, and then understanding that if you don't get an answer, don't panic, don't freak out, but trust the answer that comes to your mind. And then it goes from like that. That's like lesson one is just like learning lesson, like yes, no. Asking yes, no questions. Are you hungry is a really good one to start with. Are you hungry? If you have a dog, do you want to go for a walk? And you can say, oh, all dogs want to go for a walk. Again, that's not necessarily the case. It's pouring rain here. My dogs are not interested in getting wet today. So it's real simple. Are you ready are you tired? Whatever. Are you in pain? I think is another one that just yes, no. And if it says yes, again, not being alarmed, just accepting whatever answer is given, and also accepting if you don't get an answer. For me, I go into like a hyper focus when I'm in session. So I don't hear anything around me. I am just focused in. And I turn my brain off. I had a surgeon once explain to me it's their Zen mode, that when they're in surgery, that they are, again, hyper focused and they can't hear anything else, that time just escapes them. It's very similar for me. Not that I'm comparing myself to a surgeon at all, but it's just that mode of concentration. So it's like my thoughts don't even enter. Like the only way I'm keeping track of time is on my computer and my clock next to me. But for people we all have the ability to communicate with our animals. And so many times during sessions, I talk to people and they're like, I knew that. Innately, they knew that. They had the feeling their dog doesn't want to watch them. Their dog doesn't like when they watch them pee. I knew that. So a lot of these things is just confirmation. So that's just what opening up to this is. And no judgment on any of those wonderful sessions that are wonderful, animal communication courses that are more expensive. I'm not saying anything about the price. I'm just saying I wanted to make it easy. Because I'm sure it's great. Yeah. I'm just very, very, not bare bones, but I'm very much like, it's like 10, 20 minutes. You got 10, 20 minutes, easy.
Yeah.
You can take 10, 20 minutes in your car.
At the end of the day, it's about building a better world for humans and animals together, right?
Definitely. And understanding they are more alike than different. And I think that's the biggest challenge and the biggest heartbreak for me is so many animals that are abused, that have been through trauma, or they pass due to getting hit or something. Right now, I work with an organization in England, actually, that's working because England, you have these very narrow roads. And so a lot of animals are getting hit on a daily basis. They either are not even noticing that they're stopping, but there's no laws there. There's no laws really here. If you hit an animal legally, it depends on the state, but I don't think you have to stop where we are. So it becomes very apparent that our respect and our value, we value human life at such a regard, but we don't value pets at the same way. And, I hear people talk all the time, like, well, they're animals. What do you expect? I mean, I grew up on a farm where we didn't go to the vet. I mean, my dad, when animals were ready to go, he would take them out and shoot them because that's what you did on a farm. And it's horrific. And I've had that conversation with my father, but there's no law. There's no laws. There's no respect. And it's easier to call people like me crazy and discount us. And because I think the truth is more painful, because if we address that animals have thoughts and feelings, and we also have to address the fact that we're eating them. We also have to address that we are taking away their habitats. And that's, huge stuff. That's definitely not going to, in my lifetime, is not, probably a lot of stuff that's not going to happen.
And we are only as progressed a society as we treat our most vulnerable, right?
Amen.
And our animals are incredibly vulnerable creatures.
Well, and here's something wild. So if I can talk to cats and dogs, right? If cats and dogs and horses can have feelings and emotions, can chickens? Can cows? They can. I work with cows. I work with chickens. Do they have the degree of intelligence? Maybe not, but they still have wants and needs and favorites. I have a client that has silky chickens, which are these chickens that are fluffy and they're gorgeous. And the chickens kept saying, and I had, for the record, I had no knowledge of chickens. I didn't grow up with chickens. I love them, but I had no knowledge of what they were fed. And like one of them kept saying they wanted the little lines. And my client's like, they want the dried mealworms. And so I actually went to her house. I've gone to her house a couple times actually. And I go out and the chickens recognize me. They know. And immediately they remember. Really? So again, they remember.
Wow.
If we accept that these higher beings wire then we would have to explore chickens, and not just like farm animals, lizards, right? Like how far are we going? Because I've talked to lizards. I had a bearded dragon growing up, and I love working with bearded dragons, skinks, squirrels. I work with a squirrel rescue rehabilitator in New England.
Wow.
Squirrels, intelligent,
Yeah.
feel loss.
I bet they talk
So
a lot. They seem like they talk a lot.
they definitely have strong opinions, I would say. That's why I love the squirrel rehabilitator that I work with, because she's also intuitive, and she'll ask me, okay, is this, what does it want? But what I love about what she does is her job is really to get them out in the wild. And she has a wonderful Instagram, and she will like take pictures of the squirrels will come back like a year later, and she'll recognize their markings.
What?
And she'll be like, I'm not sure if it's so and so. They remember, they are grateful. They have, yeah. So I mean, you could take this as far as you want to go. It's levels.
When your inbox pings and someone has ordered an online session with you, what kind of session absolutely lights your heart on fire and you say, I can't wait to do this?
I think they all do. Because I never know who's on the line. I never know. End of life sessions, when I get those bookings, I know it's going to be, I know I need to be, no, I won't say my A game, but I know I need to be focused, right? I know I need to get everything right with this, or at least hear it clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in other words, like we can talk to a living golden retriever that's in New York City. And if I mistake the short-haired dog walker for, I don't know, the person at the park, that might not make a crucial difference. But when we're working with end of life, I need to make sure that I'm hearing it clearly, that the animal is able to communicate everything it can or it needs to, because that might be the only chance. So that's definitely like hyper focusing on that. Missing pets, it's very similar. I need to be like as exact as I can be. I need to be, A game, very straight. I think my favorite sessions have been the ones most unexpected. The one off the top of my head I'm thinking of is with a ferret that was the most joyful, full of life ferret. And the ferret talked about this memory that this gentleman would come home from work, and the ferret would get some green stuff out of his bag, like a green treat. The ferret said he always had a green treat for me in his bag, and they would share this green treat, or he would get a green treat, and it was round, and the ferret was like explaining, like, and I was like, it's some kind of nut, but it's green. And the ferret would sit there and join its owner, and the guy just starts cracking up, like just like this belly laughter, and I'm going, what? And he said, that wasn't a green peanut, that was pot. And I don't think I had laughed to the point of crying. And it never had, I mean, it's not like the ferret overdose, right? I mean, this ferret lived quite a bit, but it would join. And the guy, I don't think he realized it until I told it. He didn't realize that the ferret was indulgent. But he was like, that's where I kept my bud. I recorded a TikTok of the story, and it's on there somewhere, but that's probably one of my most memorable. Yeah. And again, the ferret was healthy. It just had a little nibble, but it talked about enjoying this green nut, and the owner would imbibe himself, and he just thought the ferret was just living its best life. And I from what I recall, the ferret's name was something close to a nickname for marijuana. I don't know, it was Mary Jane, Mary Ann. There was some name, because I was just rolling. I was like, you cannot make this up. The ferret's name was something similar to pot.
Oh, little ferret, you go get your bake on.
But there's no way I would know this. No way I would know. And the ferret had passed. But the fact that I was able to give that gift to that gentleman, and I spoke with him a couple of times after that, because I mean, when you talk about something like that, I mean, I couldn't stop laughing. Like, I think it was like a good 5 minutes where we were just, because I just said, are you kidding me? Like, like, what the hell? So yeah, so that's probably my most memorable, but I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to come into with a session, which I love. I love that, it's unexpected and it can be joyful and sorrowful, but it's all in one. I love being able to help. That's what, and I really feel I'm this is definitely a calling for me. I don't have a choice in doing this, and my heart just, I have to help. I have to. It's a calling. I will be doing this my entire life joyfully. As long as I get plenty of Real Housewives breaks, I'll be okay. Yeah, no, I love it because that's the only time I can like turn my brain off. And people will be like, "Do you sense them?" No, no. When I watch TV, no.
If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice about communicating with their pets, what would it be?
Talk to your pets. Talk to them like they're preschoolers, like they're toddlers. Say good morning to them. Ask them how their day was. Tell them when you're leaving. Tell them, okay, I'll be back, and give them a visual. I'm going to be back by the time the sun goes down. I'm going to be back when it starts raining, or whatever that is. Talk to them. Ask them how their day was. Talk to them. That's the biggest piece of advice, and the way you can find that you can improve your relationship with them. It's just talking to them. They love it. They love the sound of their voice, your voice. They might not understand every word, but they understand the connotation.
That's beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
Sure.
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm glad. I talk to Bella all the time. Are you hungry? Is an easy yes/no question. Of course the answer is yes. She's hungry all the damn time. I swear she has a hollow leg. I wish I could get more answers from her and understand better what she's thinking. Then again, after her reading with Laurie Blomer and learning how much she likes to talk, I'm not sure that's the best path forward either. The most important thing I need her to communicate with me, though, is whether she is safe and feels loved. And reading her eyes, I'm pretty sure the answer to both questions is yes. Next week, we have another roundtable with the professional pet photographers of One Last Network. We're gathering together to talk about the lessons we've learned from the animals who have shared their lives with us. This one is going to be a doozy. Make sure you come back. I'm Angela Schneider, owner of Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington, and your host at One Last Network, signing off to go get some Bella snuggles. Listen to One Last Network on whichever podcast platform you prefer. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you have a friend who might be interested in our content, make sure you share us with them. Thanks for listening.